Welcome to the Franchise Woman podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships forged. I'm Rebecca Monet, CEO and Chief Scientist at Zorkel Profiles. I'm here with my friend, co host, community advocate, speaker, author, and entrepreneur, Tracy Kawa. Tracy, we have two very special guests today. Casey Cooley, the Director of Franchise Development of Real Estate at Jeremiah's Italian Ice and President of Pivotal Growth Partners, and Michael Keller, President and CEO of Jeremiah's Italian Ice. America's new frozen force, Jeremiah's Italian Ice, has reawakened the frozen dessert industry with the innovative, craveable product you must try to believe. Jeremiah's Italian Ice has a huge base of diehard fans and an irresistible culture of cool. So welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you. A
Thanks for
great
having us.
summary of Jeremiah's. Thank you.
Well, I am definitely a raving fan of Jeremiah's. So let's get started with finding out how each of you came into franchise, stepped into franchise, fell into it. Maybe we can start with you, Casey.
Yeah, it's a great question. As you and your listeners may know, they don't really teach franchising in school. You know, it was great, blessed to go to a great business school, a great university, and not a single class or article from Harvard Business Review was ever about franchising, right? And so I was lucky enough after school, one of like our kind of like me and my best friend, our thing we did every Sunday after football games, we'd go to a frozen treats concept called Sweet Frog and go have some frozen yogurt, right? This is the thing we did. And we do week after week over the season. And come playoff time, December, January, the line keeps getting longer and longer and longer outside, which is very atypical for a frozen treats concept. And he was a kind of entry level PE guy, analyst at a PE firm. And I said, hey, look, like I don't know anything about PE right now, but you should look at this brand because this is kind of like atypical for a concept. And so, long story short, he looked at it. They did an investment into it. That it started franchising, and they were like, hey, you know, we trust you. You kind of helped us find this. Would you like to do this with us? And so I kind of fell into franchising for that perspective, and was blessed to kind of have that opportunity and role and be able to actually grow an emerging franchise concept. So it wasn't something that had franchised before. Very few people in the company had any franchise experience. We kind of all kind of put our hands in on the table and said, let's all work together to make this great. And we're really blessed of the success we had there, and we're able to kind of grow it the right way with the right people, with great franchisees, and have a really cool success story from that.
Nice. How about you, Mike?
Yeah, so mine's a different story, naturally so, different person, different story. And I don't even know that I knew that I fell into franchising until it had already happened. I had worked at Bain, and I had worked at Nestle chocolate company, and I was looking to make a change. And that change I made was to join the Baskin Robbins team in Southern California. And I was a consumer marketer, so I was looking for great consumer brands. The brands I worked on at Nestle were some of those brands like Butterfinger. And I was looking for another great brand, and Baskin Robbins was right there in Southern California where I was. So I joined the team in the middle level marketing ranks. And I think I quickly figured out at that point that I was in a franchise system. My family had been in the supermarket business, so I was very comfortable with the idea of multi-unit retail. But I hadn't really even processed as a young professional what it meant to be in the franchising business. But boy, did I learn quickly. And I spent 4 good years there. And now being here at Jeremiah's, this is now the 5th restaurant concept I've worked for, and 3 or 4 of them have had substantial franchising components, including this one here. So it started it all the way back then, and I've been around a bunch of them, and maybe it's because I like it. Maybe I'm familiar with it. Maybe in some ways I've gotten good at aspects of it. You could also argue it might have something to do with the fact that it's ice cream and frozen treats, because there's a straight line through all of my concepts through that.
Well, and I think there's something that there because the concepts you've been involved in when I did some research on you are all kind of sweet related, right? And having a sweet tooth myself, I can appreciate that a whole lot.
Yeah,
So
it's funny. I do have a sweet tooth. I have a crazy crazy cookie habit would be the best way I could describe it. Serious passion for Oreos. But interestingly, I'm not a foodie, but I've been in the restaurant and packaged goods food industry for my entire career. The straight line is candy, ice cream, even Jamba Juice, frozen blended beverages,
Right.
also sweet in a way. I think for me, what it's about, and we'll end up talking about this, I'm sure, it's about how good people feel when they consume products like this. They're kind of about happiness and joy. Individuals, families, young lovers, whatever it might be, celebrating occasions around things like ice cream and frozen treats. And I think I'm very much attracted to the fun and the joy that surrounds products like these. And yes, I have a sweet tooth, but not being a foodie, I think it's more about the retail experience and the
Yeah.
guest experience than almost anything else.
So my question to both of you is around, let's call it a pivotal moment, right? That you may have had, or an aha moment, whatever you want to call it, that then is contributing to who you are as a human being, but also as a leader. Have either of you had a pivotal moment, and do you mind sharing that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think mine really was in my career, and the timing of it happened was kind of falling into franchising. I think it was really good because it did kind of this, it gave me this foundation of this franchising knowledge because it was in the emerging franchise space, and it was like you wear many hats every day to get the job done. But I think what's the most unique thing about that is it was truly an emerging franchise brand. So as I've grown in my career, and now created a company to kind of help emerging brands grow the right way. It's, you know, taking the stuff we did well there, we didn't do well there, and stuff that I've seen at other brands, and being able to say, hey, look, there's a better way to this, right? If you take the time to do it right and set up the processes and procedures, once you kind of turn the growth button on, the growth can be a lot less messier and a lot more fluid and consistent if you just set it up the right way. And so that's very much like the structure, kind of how I've set things up in regards to my career and the businesses we work with is trying to take the time to say, hey, look, take the time to set it up correctly, to give the brand, the franchisees, the employees of the brand, everyone that's connected with the brand, the best chance of success.
Love it.
So I'll complement that with a different story. So there's two different versions of the two different answers to a similar question. So I'm a late bloomer, I guess, because my pivotal moment may have come relatively recently in the last 5 to 10 years. And to shrink it all down, I am formerly a CEO of a private equity held portfolio company. It was pretty grueling 7 years that I had there. And it was when it was time to leave, it was time to leave. And I made my next sort of business choice, next company choice, based almost exclusively on the values of the employer that I was looking at. And it happened to be a very small woman-owned, women-led consulting firm in the Twin Cities. And I was really attracted to and mesmerized by the values they had created for their organization. And I just wanted to be a part of that. And when I realized how much of a strong draw that was to me, I then look back over my career at how many times I made a good value-centric decision for myself or not. And I think in these relatively recent years, being the late bloomer, I guess that I am, I learned the hard way and the good way that to the degree you can make as values-based a decision as possible about what you're going to do with your time, your career, in your life, very helpful. It's great to be values aligned. It feels a lot better than when it's not.
Wow, you're talking our language. That's for sure. Right. As Oracle profiles, we really explore, we do a deep dive into values. And I think there really is a strong connection between the choices that we make that when we know our values, right? So I guess my question comes in the form of like, what do you recommend for somebody who maybe doesn't exactly know what their values are? How do they explore that? How do they figure out so that then they're able to align their choices and decisions with their values?
Wow, what a great question. Really great question. And I don't know that there's a simple answer to it. Maybe if I had a really good answer, I'd have a book and a speaking tour behind that too. But I don't know that I do, but I think I can give some hints.
Yeah.
And I think part of it comes from reflection, of course. So you're going to know a little bit about yourself. Almost everybody does. being honest with yourself, I think, is probably a decent way to get to some of them, but maybe not to all of them. Sometimes you don't really know what your values are till you find yourself in some form of significant conflict. Conflict with a person, conflict with an organization, conflict with an idea, conflict over a decision. There's a really good chance that in that conflict, especially if you're feeling that conflict in your body, like you feel like your nervous system is crackling, or you feel your heart racing, your mouth drying out, you are probably wrestling with something that has to do with your values and the values of something that you're dealing with. And if you can, I guess, introspect enough, maybe interrogate that enough, you might be able to root out a couple of the key values that turn out to be very important to you. And then if you could hold on to those, you could then, the analogy I like to give when I do career coaching as well, and when I talk about these things with people who spend their time with me, I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of a dream catcher, something that is common in certain Native American tribes, concepts of a dream catcher. You create a dream catcher, you wave it in the air, and in theory, the dreams get stuck on the feathers of your dream catcher and everything else passes through the dream catcher. And in many ways, the dream catcher is, for, let's say, a professional, is really just your values.
Yeah.
And you wave that around, and things that line up with your values stick, and things that don't line up with your values kind of pass through. And so you end up using values as a screen, as a filter for a way to make not only decisions, but maybe even decisions to join a company or to join a team or to join a brand.
Yeah, we say values are at the core of every decision we make, how we spend our time, money, and energy. So the more conscious we are of those values, the wiser decisions we're going to make. Casey, you said something a little earlier. I'm wondering if I can dig a little more deeply into. You were talking about everything you learned about being an emerging franchisor and the importance of structure and systems and, foundational stuff. Do you think you're just wired that way to think in terms of efficiencies or structure? Where did that come from? And talk to me why that's so important, especially for an emerging franchisor.
That's a great question. I think I am wired a little bit that way. I like order. I'm a finance major and accounting major, so like it's just very much a black and white, yes or no type of world to me from that perspective. Um, I also have this unique kind of like entrepreneurial side of me too, which entrepreneurs are not like that. So it's an interesting blend of like entrepreneurial growing things, but also bringing structure to what you're trying to do as well. So it's kind of a cool, unique kind of combination I have from that perspective. But I think it's truly, when I see something that breaks, and this is kind of comes back to like my background as an athlete too, like you missed a play or uh, you slept or you pulled a hamstring. Like, why did that happen? Like, go back in time and why did that happen? Did you overtrain? Did you undertrain? Did you not watch enough film? Like, there's different components to that led to that event. And so, applying that now to kind of the emerging franchise space, like things go array as you grow a concept, and you just assess why, and then look backward and say, where did that actually occur? And so, one of the things I was able to do with Sweet Frog and being able to look at different organizations and just see how other organizations work in franchising, it's, there's things that can be done before you actually grow a brand that if they're in the right place, the growth is that much easier. It's still going to be hard. Like nothing is easy when you grow something, but a lot of stuff that goes broken really quick or really just turns you left really quick when you should be as straight as you possibly can very much be addressed well before you say, I want to grow as an organization in the franchising space. And so I think that's a lot of the things that we do and really try to look at as we take a look at brands as saying, let's spend a lot of time right here before we try to grow it, because we know based on our experience, like if it's not done now, it's a massive problem later. So I think that's a lot of the cool takeaways I've had based on my career is seeing things that do work, that don't work, and then also seeing things like that being able to work with Michael. It's things that he's bringing based off of a really big system. It's like, wow, like okay, if we want to be like that, then if we set up a brand at 50 stores like this, then 5,000 is more probable, right? And so it's being able to kind of look backwards and also look forwards and being able to set up a brand and be able to accelerate through that process as quickly and efficiently as possible. So
That's so
Brilliant.
cool. When I hear you talk, Casey, I hear you talking about processes. And then when I'm listening to Michael, you're talking about people and the development of people and culture. Um, clearly you have to have both, right? You have to have process and people. But often in business, there are people, individuals running the business that maybe only focus on one half of those, one side, either the process or the people. So how do they go about filling in the gaps?
Great question. And I think I could even give Jeremiah as an example because Casey and I, from different vantage points, have witnessed the same thing. We have a very charismatic founder. And if it wasn't for him, Jeremy, for whom Jeremiah is named, neither Casey nor I would even be sitting here talking to you about Jeremiah's because it was because of Jeremy. Really charismatic guy, vision for the brand, vision for the product. What he recognized a couple of years ago, though, is that as the founder entrepreneur that he was not the right person to help scale an organization like Jeremiah's needs to, because his skill set is different from a skill set of, let's say, a more professional manager who's maybe been there, done that, and has been in an environment where they can see all the things that are needed, some of what Casey was just describing earlier. So Jeremy made a decision year and a half plus ago to step aside as day-to-day CEO and look for somebody like me to come in and help him run the company because he had the culture piece. He built the culture. He got the company to where it was, but a lot of coaches were telling him, and a lot of his own self-reflection was, I'm probably not the manager that's going to help Jeremiah's grow from this place to the next place. Let's go find somebody who's been there, done that, or has experience, to Casey's point about what it looks like in its mature state, so we could figure out how to get from where we are to where we're going. And in some ways, that's what he found in me. And while I passionately believe in some of the things I've already discussed and these values of Jeremiah's right here over my shoulder, I'm also very much like Casey, a process guy. And part of what I've been asked to bring to Jeremiah's is a mindset of let's create things that last. Let's create things that we can use over and over again, very much to scale. Something that Casey and I talk about all the time. Let's try to avoid making one-off decisions that just suit a specific situation now, because if we do that, we'll just swamp ourselves in one-off decisions all over the place. Let's try to make system-oriented decisions. Let's try to look as far forward as we can and make decisions that will kind of grow well with time, so that kind of the exact point Casey was making about efficiency and thinking about how you can take something small and make it large, and doing so by putting the things in place to allow that to happen. I happen to have some of that experience. Also happen to have this kind of notion of values coursing through me, maybe because this is the 8th company I've worked at or for, and I've accumulated some of that experience. So trying to blend those things together.
What I really love, and Tracy, you kind of hit on this, is how well Casey and Michael complement each other, right? So it's a really beautiful team. Just with the two of you, I'd be interested in meeting the whole team, but this is incredible. Casey, I have a question for you, actually for both of you, Michael and Casey, is if you had a theme in your life, something that seems to run through your life, what would that theme be?
yeah, it's going to reinforce a lot of what I've said today. It's really work smarter, not harder. Kind of came to me in college, and it's a little bit of back to the efficiency of practice and strength conditioning and training and sports performance and speed. Like there's a right volume and the right speed at the right time, or the right weight at the right time, or the right intensity at the right time to get the maximum results, right? And so I've always kind of taken that, and still a sports junkie today. Me and Michael talk sports all the time, but kind of applying that now into the business world. It's like, is this really the best way to do this? And there's always a time to roll up your sleeves and go get it done. But then once it's done, you can look back and say, was that really necessary? Is there something like in the past that we could have done to really prevent this going forward into the future? So, between the combination of sports and kind of the entrepreneurial mindset of an emerging franchising, and kind of the replication of systems and scaling businesses, I've always kind of had that kind of be a kind of a quote that's always stuck with me, and I've always kind of used it. So
And I can
Yeah, I really,
see you using it right now within Jeremiah's. Michael, how about you?
yeah, I was going to say, I'd like to build on what Casey said, because I agree with this notion of work smarter, not harder. And I might just have a slightly different interpretation of the work smarter piece, just because I've had the opportunity over a larger stretch of time, I suppose, to work in so many different companies. So I'm 1965. I'm the first year of Gen X. There's many things about me that behave in quite a boomer fashion, including earlier in my career. I would easily work 75 to 100 hours a week if that was necessary. And I did it for years at Bain, and I did it for years at Nestle, because I thought that's what you did. And I just did it, nose to the grindstone, just go, because I thought that's what necessary. And that certainly almost describes what Casey was talking about. I didn't necessarily work smarter. I was just working harder. So started getting smarter over time, and again, a bit of a late bloomer. So I think part of the working smarter piece is back to the values thing that I was talking about earlier, is finding a company, an organization, a group of people, individuals, a brand, whatever it might be, that aligns with your values, so that as you work hard, or when you work hard, you are also doing it in a way that feels very consistent with who you are. And you feel like you're adding value to something that means something to you. It's adding value in some way back to you. And I think the combination of that, those two factors, is part of what working smarter, not harder is about, especially as you get further into your career and further down the road.
It also sounds like there's an element of purpose in there.
I
Is
was
that
just
what I'm
going to say that, Tracy,
Yeah.
because if you're working from passion or purpose,
Yeah.
then you're using your energy in the appropriate way, right?
Yeah, I agree.
absolutely.
In fact, we have an interesting purpose. I would almost define our purpose differently than I would have thought I would have. This brand is a very generous brand. Our founder, Jeremy, founded it in many ways by being super generous in the communities in which we operated. Many of our best franchisees have fully embraced that concept, and they are generous as well. It's one of many values that's very important. And you could also argue that, wow, what a great brand, and the way it contributes to a community. Who wouldn't want to get behind that and make more of something of that? And I think that's important. There's actually another layer, and both Casey and I work on this a lot. We talk about this a lot. One of the reasons I'm at Jeremiah's, one of the reasons why Casey and I work on the things we do, one of our purposes is to make our franchisees as successful as possible. They are independent businessmen and businesswomen. They invested a lot of money in Jeremiah's. And one of the reasons we're here is to do everything we can to make them as successful as possible, to scale this business to benefit them. In many ways, that is one of the key purposes that's driving what I do, and drives what Casey does as well, to help out in the Jeremiah system.
Mm-hmm. So, gentlemen, Tracy brought up this topic of purpose, and you've articulated it beautifully about helping our franchisees be the most successful they can be and to support them. So tell us about Jeremiah's Italian Ice. What are you up to? What's the future look like? Casey, let's look at it through your lenses first.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's interesting. So I'll answer from like a franchise development, real estate, construction component, right? Because I know Michael had some of the other things, but it's a really interesting environment, not only at Jeremiah's, but in the QSR space alone. Um, Everything costs more, from from an oven to a mixer to the countertop to the tile to the signage. Like, everything costs more than it did 3 or 4 years ago. So you're seeing a lot of brands today just rethink, what does my box look like, right? What does it look like? What does it feel like? How is the customer experience presented? At the end of the day, it's really trying to solve, like, what is the initial investment of my box? Because the box 3 years ago is probably costs 3 times as much as it does today, right? And so one of the things I've been working closely with Michael and the team on is, like, potentially just testing, like, what is our box going forward? Can we be smaller? Can we look and feel differently? What does that look and feel like from a consumer's perspective? What does that look and feel like from a development perspective of how many opportunities of that smaller box are out there? And so that's one thing we've been working on very closely over the last 7 months now, is kind of that test in that program. And just trying to see, can the brand play a little differently going forward? And I think And which was really funny because a lot of it's going back to its roots. The original store we opened was a pretty small location. It was a drive-through location, but still pretty small, pretty efficient menu. So a lot of what we're trying to do is actually go back to the original roots of Jeremiah's, which is pretty unique as well. And so we've been, there's a lot of different components to that, going into the type of franchisee and the type of real estate and the type of, the development of the store. All at the end, just saying like, what does the box of Jeremiah's look and feel like going forward, and how does that affect those different aspects of franchising?
Just to clarify, the box, is that like the storefront or
The
is that
store, yeah.
the
Yeah,
store?
the store. So the four walls, right? Everything within the four walls and everything attached to it.
Okay, thank you.
And Michael, tell us your current vision of Jeremiah's and what are you seeing for the future?
Sure. So a couple things. One, I'll tie it back to the purpose piece we just came off of. One of the things that we're up to here at Jeremiah's is turning ourselves into the franchisor that we need to be to help our franchisees be successful and to allow this brand to grow. So interestingly, we've been around for 28 years. That's a long time, but we've only been franchising for 5. And this is the 5th year now. So we are a 28-year-old brand, but only a 5-year-old franchisor. So we have some growing up to do, professionalizing, processes to put in place, things to set up to enable any given franchisee or whole system of franchisees to be successful going forward. The good news is, I suppose, is I have some perspective on that because I worked in 2 of the largest frozen treat retailers in the United States. So that's part of what I'm sort of carting over with me to this experience here. It's like, okay, so here's where we are, here's where they are. How do we work on closing the gap between the two? It's an enormous industry we're in. The food service space of the United States, I believe, is somewhere around 1.2, food industry is around $1.2 trillion. Wow. Half of that is the food service industry. And a huge percentage of that is the quick service retail industry, McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's. And inside of that are the snack and treat retailers like a Starbucks, for example, and even the Dairy Queens, Baskin Robbins, and Jeremiah's of the world. So we have a lot of very large brands swirling around us, and consumers have a lot of choices. So we have to figure out how to stand out. And we have to figure out how to stand out, not only in terms of recruiting franchisees to build our brand, but also how then our franchisees can stand out at the local level versus their competitors. So we have to propel this brand forward. We have to imagine ways to grow our menu without making our operation complex, because our relatively simple menu is what's attracted many franchisees to the brand. We have to do the kinds of things that get people really excited about visiting a restaurant, a cool new product, a cool new flavor, a new aspect to the experience. Every one of our competitors is always trying to do the same thing, and we're up to those things too. So we have a lot of that going on that wasn't necessarily going on before. As an example, recently hired a former R&D executive from Sonic Drive-In Restaurants, one of probably the more successful medium to large size restaurant companies in the US. And she now works with us, and we're trying to do things that she did at Sonic and I did at Dairy Queen and Baskin Robbins, but do them here at little old Jeremiah's to help us compete, maybe almost in like an outsized way, so that we can make a great impression on our guests and help our franchisees be successful. It all keeps kind of looping back to that. So lots of cool new things happening to help the brand grow and mature, which will allow us to expand. We have almost 160 stores in 11 states, and we're growing really nicely. A lot to do with Casey's team's efforts to help develop and drive the brand. And we want to sustain that momentum. So to do that, we have to be good at everything that a franchisee would expect us to be good at. And we have to be good at the kinds of things that a consumer, especially a female head of household, would want to see in a frozen treat brand.
Wow. So obviously you're both highly skilled. So what would each of you say is the number one quality attribute that you bring to the team? Like, what have you been told? What do people see in you? What do your teams see in you? What do your franchisees see in you?
Oh boy.
Good
What do you
question.
think? What would they boil it all down to?
Like 3 adjectives almost.
Yeah.
Casey is this and
And
Michael.
not just one. Rebecca's giving you 3.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
Just
I'll
so the viewer
start.
knows, we got no forewarning on this question, so
Yeah.
we're having to
All
figure this
right.
out right
All
now.
right. Trick
I'm a
question.
I've heard this and I hope it's shared. I would say like always there. I think, whether it's a franchisee or someone on the team or someone on my team or whatever it may be, I try to be responsive as quickly as I can. It's very much so in the franchising space. Franchisees depend on us to be successful, and so it's always top of mind to me from my perspective. If a franchisee calls me, if I don't call you back in 24 hours, you need to call my wife because something happened, right? And that's kind of always kind of trying to create that expectation from that perspective. Um, Patient, I think I am patient. I think a lot of people say I'm pretty patient from what goes on. If I raise the red flag and get a little angry, it matters because I am kind of pretty even keeled, patient from that perspective for the most part. And I think very much like pragmatic. I'm very like, as you guys can tell, very much a process person, very measured in what's happening today, what's happening tomorrow, and kind of tie that all in together to be, a support to the franchisees and to the Jeremiah's team and to everyone that's involved in the organization.
That's a good description. By the way, I'm one of those people that test Casey's patience. Oops.
Somehow I believe that.
So as for me, I think I'll try to do the three thing. Other than the fact that a lot of people tell me I talk too much, I'll set that aside for the moment. I think enthusiasm. I bring in enthusiasm to what I do into a business that seems a little bit unusual in general, but even at this stage of my life, a little uncharacteristic for my age. A lot of people refer to it as youthful enthusiasm. I'd like to think that's true. I also have a bit of a blend of right brain, left brain. I have a fair amount of creative firepower from a decades-long career in marketing, but also am very process-oriented because it's really important to get traction and get stuff done. An idea is not a good idea if you can't execute against that idea. And so I blend those two together, which doesn't always happen. Maybe it's my former marketing career. I don't know, but I have that. And I think the other thing that really helps in a franchise system is I'm what I would call a synthesizer. I synthesize a lot of disparate either points of view, disparate pieces of information to try to cull it down into something that we could use to make decisions and move forward. And in a franchise system, you have as many opinions as there are franchisees. And yet you can only make one decision about something when you're a franchisor. So you have to do a lot of synthesizing. And I think I have had some good training in that, having been in multiple franchise systems. And I'd like to think it's a skill that I'm bringing to Jeremiah's to help us synthesize the many points of view that are in this young system.
Oh, beautiful. Tracy, that was an incredible question. I'm so glad you asked that because it really does get to the heart of the matter who these gentlemen are and why they work so well together. So we're coming up on the top of the hour. Guys, I think we could talk forever and ever. I want to make sure that folks know how to get hold of you if they want to learn more about Jeremiah's. How would someone do that?
Best opportunity is just jeremiahsitalianice.com. There's really good stuff about the brand. There's also a whole kind of gateway into the franchising aspect of what we're doing as well. And so you can dive into the latest and greatest flavor and product to the last franchisee that opened and everything in between through our website. And I think that's a really good place to start and go from there.
I would agree. And I'd add to this discussion here that if anybody is particularly moved or inspired by any words that Casey and I shared, them reaching out to you two to find out how maybe they could get a hold of us and the group we work with that connected us to you would also be a great funnel that they could go through. So either one of us would be glad to speak with anyone who's important to you. And all they have to do is reach out to you to find us, and we'd be there for them as well.
I love it. Well, do you do deliver to your home things, ice packet, send it? You do?
Well, in the trade areas around the stores, we don't necessarily ship it far and away, although our product is very mobile. It's very transportable. So maybe we could figure something out.
Cool. Cool. Tracy, you're always the best at wrapping things up. What are your final thoughts?
So, well, first of all, I thought of a title possibly for Michael's first book and his stage topic, which could be dream catching your values. So I think that's a pretty cool one. Second of all, it was something that each of you said that first triggered this thought and then reconfirmed it for me. And both Casey and Michael touched on this. It was about what got you here won't get you there, right? I don't know if that's the name of a book but I know it's a catchphrase, and that really triggered me to associate that line with Jeremiah's. Because I think what we have in front of us, Rebecca, these two incredible minds together are so innovative. Like, this is really honestly an innovative company, an innovative duo that is literally doing what Michael said. They're each taking everything. You're each taking everything that you've learned in the past, all of your wealth of experience at other dessert companies, other industries, and just synthesizing everything into innovation to find what's going to get you there. So I really applaud the effort. I love the conversation. I wish we had a whole other hour together. I really applaud what you guys are doing at Jeremiah's. And I can't wait to see, what happens in the next 5 years.
Me too.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I echo what you're saying, Tracy. It is an unusual business when you can combine that structure that we're focused on with innovation. I've seen companies have one or the other, but in this case, what we have at Jeremiah's is both. So it's a beautiful combination. Thank you again, gentlemen, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And for those of you listening in to the Franchise Woman podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships forged, make sure to like, comment, share this interview. And of course, we'll see you next week on another episode.
Thank you. Bye-bye.